Hey everyone, this is Nick on Control Nick, and today we're going to learn about the all-powerful tool if. If is a functionality in Excel that allows you to add logic and decision making to how you apply different functions within your Excel workbook. It's a versatile tool, and I'm going to give you a couple examples how we can actually use it. We're going to have some basic examples, and then we're also going to have a more difficult example that we'll walk you through based off of a nesting if statement. A little bit trickier, but we're going to go through each step by step in the workbook. All right, welcome to the If Excel workbook. So before we get started into the scenarios, I just want to explain exactly what this is by a quick step by step. So step one is you just want to start the formula. Just like everything else in Excel, you're just going to type in your equal sign and then start typing if for if. Starting with a parentheses, that's starting your if function. Step two, you're then going to enter the condition you want to test. So here I have example, you want cell A1 to be greater than 50. Now in step three, you're going to specify what happens if it's true and what happens if it's false. So for example, if A1 is greater than 50, then you want to say yes. But if it's not greater than 50, let's say it shows no. Very simple, and we'll go through that. Step four, you close out the formula just like everything else, which is just adding that closing parentheses. Okay, now we're actually in the first exercise set. These are the first examples and they're going to be pretty basic, but I hope it already just starts to enlighten you a little bit on what the versatility is with using if statements. Let's get started. Here what I have is our scenario one. We have 5 different sales reps, John, Olivia, Sam, Nick, and Christine, and they've generated a certain amount of revenue over a certain period of time, whatever that time might be, but you can now measure this revenue versus a target. So John has generated 10,000 in revenue, Olivia 12,000, Sam 7,500, and so forth. In the next column, you have their targets. So you can see that both John and Olivia have 11,000 as a target. Sam has 9,000, Nick has 10,000, and Christine has 11,500. This, in the next column, gives their percent to target. How did they actually do in revenue versus the target that they were given, right? So you have all the percentages here. And as you can see, if I double click, it just shows that it's just revenue divided by target. Very simple. Now, though, what we want to do is check, do they actually qualify for a bonus based off of the target that they were given? And that's where we're actually going to use the if statement. So if they qualified, then yes. If not, then no. All you do is you start with your equal sign. And again, just like the step-by-step guide, we'll start typing if, parenthesis. Now we want to reference what we're choosing to be greater than or less than or whatever. It's just the reference cell that you want to do this statement for. So since we're looking at the percent to target and we're checking whether that target is going to be above or below the qualifier, we're going to select the cell here, 91%, and we're going to say this 91% needs to be greater than or equal to 100% in order to qualify. So as you can see in the formula, you have the logical test being F6 greater than or equal 100%. You put comma, and then you're going to say what happens if that's true. So if that 91% is greater than or equal to 100%, you're going to type whatever you want to type. So let's say you type in true, and then you close it out by putting a comma. So if it's greater than or equal to 100%, you put true. If it's not, they're not going to qualify, right? So then we can say false. Now what I do is I finish the formula by clicking on parentheses to close it out and click enter. You can see since the percent to target for John was 91%, they do not qualify for whatever bonus you plan to give them because they're not hitting their target. So it just shows as false. Let's do it again. Equal sign, if parenthesis, we're going to select 109% because that's where we're going to put the formatting for. And then we're going to say greater than or equal to 100%, comma, true, comma, false, close parentheses. Exact same setup. Click enter. Now you can see that it's true. Now that we have our formula, and assuming that the bonus qualifier is the same for everyone, so they all have to do at least 100%, all I'm going to do is drag it down. Now, a little trick that we can do is I like to reference always other cells so it's easier to type, meaning rather than using the 100% in here, maybe we want to add some flexibility to see, okay, how many qualify depending on the percent that we're associating. Now, the issue with doing that sometimes is that if you type it in manually, you'll have to drag down the formulas again, retype. It just becomes a bit of a hassle. What I'd rather do is actually type in 100% as the bonus percent qualifier here. And then all I'm going to do is delete the 100% that we have in our formula in G6. Select the reference cell. So I'm essentially replacing that 100% with the cell that shows 100%. And then I just want to click on F4, which is the key on my keyboard. That's going to lock the cell. And please remember, F4 or the cell locking function might be a little bit different on your keyboard. So you might just need to look that up. But on mine, I'm just going to press F4 and you can see these dollar signs show up, which means now it's fully locked to that cell. And then what I can now do is drag down the formula and it's going to stay the same. So you can see if I go down to cell G10, it's still referencing 100% in cell G4. And now what's really cool about this is if I want to change the qualifier, so it's not 100% because let's say maybe that was too difficult for this year, we can actually change to 90% in cell G4 instead of manually typing in the cells below. And what's going to happen is you can see that everything starts to update in the formulas down. So now there's more people that actually qualify for their bonus. You can change it to however many different numbers you'd like, and you can see how that changes, right? So your formula or your if statement is going to constantly update based off of the qualifier percent that you're putting in. That's just one scenario. Now, let's go to scenario 2. Now we're in scenario 2 of the basic examples. So we have a similar setup here with the table. We have students now. There's 5 different students, Greg, Cynthia, George, Frank, and Macy, and they're all doing a type that I've written out, which is an exam. So it's not homework, this is an exam for them. And what we want to write out is what happens depending on the grade that they have. So using an if statement, we'll be able to say, are they passing or are they failing, depending on their grade result. Here we have the pass percent as 85%. And in the next column, we have what was the grade for each of these students. So we're going to use the exact same if statement logic to say, are they passing or failing? Except we're not going to write out true or false this time. We're actually going to write out pass or fail. And actually, I'm going to just explain how do you actually write out pass and fail versus just true or false, because there's a slight twist to that. So I'm going to click into cell G17, and we're going to just start the if statement function. So equals if parenthesis. I'm going to check on this grade here, the 79%, and all I'm going to show is simple if formula. So if this is greater than or equal to 85%, comma, I'm going to say pass. Now, you can't just type in pass because when you're writing in specific text that's not true or false, you have to add quotation marks so that it shows that it's specifically text that you wanted to write out, or else Excel just won't understand. So as you can see, I'm going to write this quotation mark here. I'm going to write the words pass. I'm just doing all caps. You don't have to do that. And then I'm going to close out the quotation mark. That's going to give the first portion of the if statement. This is if it's true, what's going to happen. Next, I do comma, and then I'm going to do what happens if they don't pass, which would be fail in this instance. So again, quotation mark, fail, typed out, quotation close, and that's your what if it doesn't happen part of the if statement. I'm going to close the parenthesis and click enter. So you can see, unfortunately for Greg, the passing percent was 85%. However, Greg only achieved a 79%, which still good, but unfortunately for this test, it looks like it's pass or fail, and Greg has failed this test. Now, just like above, I'm just going to drag down, so I won't repeat this piece because it will be the exact same setup. But as you can see, when I drag down the formula, I can easily see who's passed and who's failed based off of this 85% criteria. Now, again, like example one above, I'm actually just going to replace this 85% rule with putting in the specific pass percent in G15. So let's say we don't want to use 85 and we're going to be changing it up to 80%. So same setup as earlier. I'm actually not going to reference this cell here. I'm actually going to, as you can see, hover over the edge of the reference, and I'm going to drag that over to G15. Then, just like the other example, using F4 on my keyboard, I'm going to lock the cell. Now you can see the cell is locked, and I'm going to drag down my formula, and you can see that now everything is set up to reference G15 rather than the cells over here in column E. Which means, once again, you add that flexibility and that smartness to your Excel workbook, because now you can update the pass percent much quicker, and you can see that the grades are changing quickly as well. So we have 4 now of these students that are passing and 1 that's failing, because the one that is failing, unfortunately, which is George, only achieves 73%. But again, maybe if you wanted the pass percent to be 70%, you'll see now everyone passes. Okay. So here we are in example 2. So before going through each of the columns, I'm just going to set the scene a little bit. You've received some information on your full book of business, let's say. That full book of business, meaning all the customers you have. And you've received actually a rebate qualification list. So what I have over here actually in columns N, O, and P are the rebate tiers. So you have tiers 1 through 5. You have the percent to target that each customer in your book of business would qualify for. And then in column P, you have what amount of rebate would they actually get if they qualify for these different tiers. Now we need to figure out what tiers do they belong to. So we're going to do the simple route, and then we're going to go towards the nesting if route. And actually, I'm going to pin this Excel workbook for you in the video so that you can actually download this if you'd like, because it does get a little bit tricky. Let's start off with tier 1. So I've already written this out for you, but I'll rewrite it out so that it's straightforward and easy for you to grasp. Let's start with less than 100%. We're going to do the exact same setup as we've done in the other scenarios. So I'm going to type into cell G3 here. I'm going to type equals if parenthesis. We're going to check on this 57% and say if it's less than 100%, because we're following tier 1 in column G, then, which is a comma, we're going to do 0% as the rebate back. Then I'm going to do comma again. And since we don't care about the value if false, we're just going to put in those quotation marks. Close parentheses, enter. Looks like we actually have something populating. So you can see that 57% is less than 100%. So they don't qualify for a rebate this year. Now in this bottom corner, when I get this plus sign on the cell, I'm just going to double click so that the cell formula follows all the way down. So when I click here in the corner twice, you can see all of these customers that actually, they don't qualify for a rebate. They're all less than 100%. Now this is going to be a little bit trickier because we're going to go into the next tiers. And in the next tiers, as you can see in column O, we kind of need to double up here. We need to say within a range. So we need to say an if statement if it's greater than or equal to 100%, and also if less than 105%. So in cell H2, I've already written it out for you. And then what we're going to do is rewrite it again. Let's follow along here in the formula bar. So same thing as always, you're starting with your if statement. Now, when you write your if statement in parentheses, you can then add an and or an or piece so that you can add additional decision making and logic to your formula. So since we need to fall within a range, I'm using and. So I start off with if and what and is going to do is going to say this and this, meaning 100% greater than or equal to and less than 105%. So I'll explain it here. If parenthesis and parenthesis, because we're still following within the first part of the if statement, F2 is greater than or equal to 100%, comma, so still following the and statement, so and F2 is less than 105%. Parenthesis close, comma. So you're still following with this whole and statement as part of the first section of the if statement. Then when you're happy with that logic, which means now you've applied the range, all you need to do is then figure out the rest of the if statement using the same logic as before. So again, we're just going to use 3% as the rebate if they're within that range. And if not, once again, it's okay. We don't need to do the second part. We're just going to make it look clean and do quotation marks. Let's write that out together because I think that's going to really make it easier. So equals if parenthesis. So starting our if statement, if this, then that. If not, then this, right? But again, we're in the range. So and parenthesis. So and gives you a limited number of different options that you can actually put into your statement. But we only need the range of two different numbers, right? So we want to check if this percent to target, which is 57%, is greater than or equal to 100%. This comma now means and this 57% here is less than 105%. Close. So closing that parenthesis is only closing out the and statement. So we're not done yet with the if statement, but we're done with the logic of the beginning. Now we have the logic of as long as it's greater than or equal to 100% and less than 105%. Comma, and now we're going to the logic. So if it falls within that range, what do? We say 3%, because over in the table, we have the rebate within that range of 3%. So that's what is going to pop out if it's true. If it's false, again, for this example, nothing needs to be added in. We're just going to put the clean quotation marks twice. Close parentheses, enter. Nothing populates. Why is that? Because we know that each of these customers can only fall into one tier, right? So all of these customers fall into the less than 100% tier, so they're not getting a rebate. Where can we expect the first time for tier 2 to show up? If I look at the percent to target, in theory, the first time a number should populate is for United Dynamics, this customer here. So what I'm going to do is just drag the formula down and see what happens. There it is. So because you applied that logic, Excel now knows that 3% is going to be applied to that customer. So it's a really cool tool set, and we're going to be able to do that for each of the tiers that we have here. So just as earlier, I'm just going to hover over the corner of my cell where it shows the plus sign, double click, and that's going to apply the logic all the way down, as you can see in the formula bar above. And if we scroll down, you can see it applies to, again, this customer Visionary Industries with 101% and a few more as we go down, right? Now, we don't need to rewrite every single logic because I like to work smarter, not harder, right? So we don't need to rewrite everything. Feel free to go back to to earlier in the video to check out how I've done each of these. But now what I'm going to do is just add a little more smartness to this so that we don't keep rewriting out formulas. So we know that 105% to 110% in the next tier follows the exact same logic as tier 2 being 100% to 105%. Also a tier 4, right? So essentially what I'm going to do is click on H3 cell. We already have that formula set up. And what I'm going to do is copy that formula, paste it over here. Now, we didn't lock any cells, so all the references are going to drag over with it. So we're going to have to adjust the reference cells. So you can see we need to, for G3, it shows twice in the formula bar because it got dragged over once. We need to drag it over back again to the percent to target. So the reference has now been fixed. And now what we need to do is just adjust the percentages in here as well as the rebate percent. So rather than showing greater than or equal to 100% and less than 105, I'm going to do greater than or equal to 105% and less than 110, like so. Then for this tier, it looks like over in the table, they qualify for 5% as a rebate. 5%, enter. Again, nothing's going to populate. And the first time we should see someone populate is, let's see, 105 to 110. If we scroll down, doesn't look like too many will hit this. Here we see infinite systems at 105. So let's check this out. I'm going to go back up to I3 where we have the new if statement, double click, scroll down, infinite systems. They're within that range, so they get 5% rebate. So I hope you can see how this logic starts to follow, right? Now I'm going to go a little bit quicker. So from tier 3 to tier 4, it's going to be essentially the same thing as we just did from tier 2 to tier 3. So copy, move over to the next cell, paste, adjust the reference because we didn't lock the cells, and adjust the percentages greater than or equal to 110% and less than 115. And the rebate percent is going to be 7. Like so. Once again, double click. You can see everything starting to populate. You can see who qualifies for this rebate now. Lastly, Tier 5 is essentially just a different version of Tier 1 because now we're just doing greater than or equal to 115%, as you can see in the exact example formula in K2, whereas Tier 1 was just less than 100%. So let's just write that out pretty quickly, right? So we do equals if parenthesis, this cell, 57%, is greater than or equal to 115%. The rebate percent we're going to give is 10%. That's a strong rebate. So very solid for some customers. If not, quotation marks, parenthesis close, enter. So now we're going to bring down all of them. You can say, ooh, actually a lot of customers are qualifying for that 10%, which in theory means it's been a very strong year for your book of business. So now we're going to be talking about nesting ifs. This is going to be a more advanced tool set, but you're about to be able to consolidate all these different formulas that you were just working with in columns G through K, all into one column in L. Now, it might seem a little daunting, and if I click into cell L2, it might also feel a little advanced, but it's okay. We're going to go through this together because it's actually a lot simpler than you might seem to realize now. What you'll notice is that When I start typing this nesting ifs formula, I don't just do an if statement, I actually just turn if plural, meaning ifs. All you need to do is then when you type in ifs, you start the formula just like normal and you do the parentheses. And then you're going to start writing out the logic as if you're going from the bottom tier all the way to the top because Excel is comfortable with working with what is the very first thing that needs to happen. And if it's not happening, what else is going to follow? And it's going to be if it's not that first thing, then what happens with this logic? And if it's not that, then what happens with the next logic, and so forth. And you can put as many of these if logic statements into this formula as you would like. So let's start off with tier 1 being less than 100% to target, being 0% rebate. So just like before in column G, all we're going to do is if F3, which is 57%, is less than 100%, 0%, right? Same exact logic as earlier. So, comma, you now go to the next logic, meaning if that 57% is greater than 100%, what's the next step here? We're going to be chunking that out. So, I'm going to select F3 again and say, well, if then F3 is less than 105%, comma, 3% rebate. Let's keep it going, right? Comma, if that 57% is then less than 110%, 5% rebate, right? Tier 4, again, select that percent to target. If it's less than 115%, we want it to populate a 7% rebate. Now, we've gone through almost all the tiers, and now we want to close it out to get the full spectrum of percentages, right? Because now we have from negative infinity all the way up to 115%. But now we want to do the final logic being if 57% is greater than or equal to 115, comma, 10%. Just like how we manually wrote out tier 5 in column K, you're going to be doing the exact same setup here. That is the last piece of this nesting ifs. You then close out with parentheses, click enter. You'll notice that it makes sense with how you're showing all the other percentages, right? So if we just start off with Everest Analytics, 0% for tier 1, this if statement is also showing 0%, but let's see what happens if it follows the same logic as these here that we're qualifying for tier 5, or even this one that qualifies for tier 2. So I'm just going to drag down a little bit, and you can see it matches, right? Really cool. It follows the exact same logic as columns G through K, except now using nesting ifs, it's able to put everything into one single column. Now, I just want to say there's no right or wrong way of doing this. You can write it out because sometimes that just looks cleaner. But if you're trying to make the most consolidated version possible for your Excel workbook, nesting ifs is a really cool and easy way to consolidate all of those columns into one. I'm just going to go here, double click, and as you can see, all the logic seems to be holding true. So again, I have the Excel workbook in the description below of this YouTube video. In row 2, in this different colored blue, I have all the formulas preset for you, so you can use that as a reference, and then you can always then mimic them below. That was actually it. Thank you for watching the if statement tutorial. Feel free to like and subscribe if you want to see more Excel tutorials. And if you have any questions, please comment below. Also, please remember that I've attached this workbook in the description to this video, so feel free to download that and play around with it as you're watching the video. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day. Bye.